friends, again to another episode of Thoughts on the Edge. We apologize for our lack of posting. That's mostly due to my fault. Again, it's the PhD takes a lot out of you and a lot of work. So, but we're back now, and we hope to post more regularly going forward. And again, to have interesting conversations. We actually hope to have guests talking about gun rights and their feelings about the Second Amendment in a future podcast. But for this one, we want to talk about the black-white binary and what that means in our conversations about identity politics specifically, which again is always a hot topic. And so again, I'm here with my good friend Reinaldo, co-host, and we're back. So without further ado, Reinaldo, there's been a lot of talk on social media and in news, obviously, with what happened in Atlanta with the shooting at the spa and hate crimes against Asians and Asian Americans, especially in light of COVID, right? And getting blamed for, the spread of COVID, et cetera. We've heard it being called the Chinese virus. So let's get started.
Yeah, it was really, first of all, I just want to say, glad to be back, guys. Sorry for ghosting. It's gotten kind of complicated the past couple of weeks and months. Just things, one thing popping back up after the other. But I'm glad to be back, glad to be having these conversations again with my good friend CJ, and of course, you guys out there listening. So let's just jump right into it. It was very, I want to say, disheartening to wake up and see that on television, that this guy just went into these different massage parlors and just started firing on Asian Americans. And his logic and his reasoning, let's just start with that, did not even make sense. He had sexual desires that Asians weren't fulfilling, and apparently he shot them to stop these sexual impulses. Now, I've talked to several people, including one of my family members in Tallahassee, who said that's complete, utter bull. Like, my cousin's exact words were that he did not believe that one bit. You targeted these people because you did not like them. And another thing that he pointed out was the fact that he said, if you're a person that's all about self-development and developing yourself and elevating yourself to the next level, where do you have the energy? Where do you find the energy even to hate on other people just because of their ethnic background? Where do you find the energy to do this type of stuff? It makes no sense to me. Like I said, I was just very,
Well, I think it's interesting, right? You pointed out sexual desires here. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, right, this is where it gets tricky with hate crimes. Mm-hmm. Right? Because especially from a legal perspective, you have to prove that there was specific animus toward a group, and usually that means hatred. Mm-hmm. Right. But here it seems, how can one, I guess this is a good question to get us going. How can one hate someone or a group that they sexually desire?
That, again, I think that's why my cousin by actually reading the article where the shooter talked about his sexual desires, it is kind of a question that makes you think, okay, was that just something that you spurred off the top of your head, or was that your actual, logic behind it? Because the two aren't exactly mutually exclusive. If you don't like a certain ethnic background, you're not going to, well, at least anyone with common sense upstairs, you wouldn't think about engaging in sexual relations with that particular background that you say you despise. It's like being trapped on an elevator with someone that you clearly do not like. You're just like, get me the heck out of here. I don't want to be here. So there's just a lot that still doesn't make sense about that. And I don't think we, the people, ever will, get the real reasoning behind why he did it.
So now, do you think that there are ethnic or racial groups that are over-sexualized?
That's a good question, actually. Are they over-sexualized?
So, for example, I heard a lot of talk, the halftime show that we, so I didn't watch the Super Bowl or the halftime show, but the weekend, right, was the performer. And a lot of people took to social media to express how they liked the weekend. And, but some were saying, well, I kind of miss, the Jennifer Lopez and the Shakira shaking their butts at halftime in Miami. So there's this whole narrative of sexualization built around Jennifer Lopez and Shakira that the weekend might not necessarily enjoy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you put it in that perspective, I think that every race is kind of over-sexualized to a certain degree, but I think some get it more than others. Some figures in different ethnic backgrounds get it more than others.
Okay, so
in the Latin community, for example, J-Lo, Shakira. In the Black community, it's Beyonce. It's those high-profile figures and those
Cardi B, and
Cardi B, another one that they honestly get it a lot. The Kardashians, obviously. So yeah, I mean, when you put it in that perspective, every race sort of is over-sexual. There's a certain figure in every race that I think is over-sexualized, but in my opinion, there are some races that get it more than others.
Yeah, and so what I found curious about this case, right, is, automatically after this, what was trending everywhere on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, was stop Asian hate, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that the media rushes sometimes to, let's get a social justice cause up because that will get, people talking, people watching the news, people debating?
Of course. Yeah.
And do you think that, because that's what I think. I think that sometimes there's a rush to hashtag things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily help the communities, actually, right? It actually further divides and further, just it gets people again rowdy, and it gets people excitable. And so the question becomes, how can we talk about specific instances of violence against groups without defaulting again to the them versus us? Because as we see with this narrative, it wasn't quite the case, right? It was more complicated. It wasn't somebody who hated necessarily. Right. According to I mean, that's my understanding of what you just said, right?
Yes.
So it complicates matters, and of course, that's not to downplay, the increase in hate crimes against Asians and Asian Americans, especially in light of COVID, right? But is this a particular instance that you believe is a good rallying cry for?
I think that the media does do a great job of overhyping a particular issue, because it's a ratings game, it's a numbers game. So just hearing their conversations sometimes when they deliver breaking news, they will say certain things, or they'll bring up certain questions about, example, what was his motive, or, what was his motive, or what was his reasoning behind it, or, something. And it's just like, are we really focused on that here?
Or there's assumptions that are already being made, right? Right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And I think part of elevating the public conversation, as that's what we're trying to do here, right? Is really not, again, caveat here, warning, nobody is excusing any type of violence.
Right.
That's not what we're saying. What happened is horrendous.
Let it be known here. We're not endorsing it.
Right. We're not excusing it.
Yeah.
So that's we need to be clear with that. That being said, I think that you're right. So the media, as soon as, I turned the TV on, as soon as I got notifications that something happened, I put on the news, and immediately it's, hate crime, and we still didn't know the facts yet.
Yeah. And there's a lot of unknown that we still don't know.
Right.
About what transpired.
Right. Absolutely.
Even with the shooting in Colorado that happened yesterday, that will be a future podcast episode, where we're going to be talking about that more in depth. But there are still so many unknown things that we still don't know, and yet the media is making assumptions. They are jumping to creating these scenarios, and it's like, you guys aren't really helping the cause. You're actually alarming the public. You're actually putting the public on more high alert than they already need to be.
Right. More anxiety. You're raising the anxiety levels of all communities.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that doesn't help the marginalized or vulnerable communities at all. That actually makes things worse, right? And it also, in a sense, pits communities against each other, right? As we see with the black-white binary, for example, right? It's either you fit in one category or you fit in the other, right? And it's usually one, according to the narrative, being the aggressor, and then the other one being the one, being violated, right? Having violence against. And again, this is not to say that stuff like that, I mean, obviously it happens, you just have to look at Childish Gambino's song, right? This is America, right? Or is it Childish Gambino? No, I'm thinking of, what's his name? This is America by, great rapper. I forgot his name. The video too, very powerful.
And you actually have me looking it up now.
Thinking of, because they're old school rappers. So it's forgot his name. Wow. And Tupac talked about it too constantly in his songs, right? He talks about how
it is that is Childish Gambino. This is America.
Yeah. Okay. So I got it right. Yeah. But Tupac used to talk about this too in his songs, especially in his album "Me Against the World." He has a couple lines in there where he says the narrative, right? He's talking about the narrative, saying that, that people constantly talk about white on black crime, right? But then Tupac is like, let me be a little controversial here and say, what about black on black crime? What about our communities, right? Doing damage to ourselves, right? So the narrative is not that clean cut. That's what I think that's what we're trying to convey here, that the narratives are never black or white.
And it's never, and increasingly what I'm seeing is that it's never going to be 100% the way every ethnic background wants it. It's just, that's not the way I think the system or the world was designed. I'm going to be very clear about that. Again, I want this to be clear right now. I am the last person in the world that is going to play victim. And I want to be very, very clear about that to a lot of my African American friends who might be out here listening and saying, "Oh my God, is he for us or is he against us?" I want to be very, very clear about that. I'm the last person that is going to play victim, and I'm the last person that is going to downplay or, hype up anything. But more and more as these crimes start happening, you do have to wonder.
Yeah.
It does make you question. It does, make you wonder almost. It makes you realize, I should say, I'm sorry. It makes you realize that this is never going to be a perfect world. There's always going to be some sort of divide amongst the people. That's just the way I think.
I mean, absolutely. You look throughout history, it's always been that way, right? There's always been conflict among classes, among different groups. It's unfortunately the way human civilization and human society seem to be set up, right? That there's always a hierarchy of some sort. And so the question is, how do we get out of these loops, this rhetoric that just, it seems like it's an infinite regress. It's like an infinite loop. We're always talking about the same things for the last, 60 years. We've been talking about the same issues. And does it lead to gains in civil rights? Absolutely. But then there's also a great book called White Man's Rage, written by a law professor at Emory. And her argument is very clear. It's every time there are civil rights gains, there's also, rights are taken away in
There's
various forms, whether it's through property rights, whether it's, through other legal mechanisms. So it's like there's always this advance and then 18 steps back, so to speak. Right. So how do we subvert that? How do we get out of this binary of, black, white, uh, you know, social justice, no social justice? And then, when elections come around, it seems like both parties mobilize their constituents and then just forget about them until the next election cycle.
It's a tough sale, really, because I don't think we'll ever be totally free of it. I think as the years progress and as we continue to elevate and put people of different ethnic backgrounds in these positions of power, there is the potential there to maybe slow it down and to progress a little bit better, but it's never going to be fully eradicated. There's always going to be some type of just animosity or difference, I should say, between classes and just.
So can you think of any strategy, especially for so-called vulnerable, marginalized communities, to resist falling prey to these rhetorical deployments, as well as political strategies of categorizing in order to get votes, but not necessarily to promote rights?
I feel like I'm on the hot seat. I feel like I'm in one of those.
No hot seat. I mean, this is unscripted, right? It's our thoughts, unfiltered.
It's great questions. I hear a lot. Just by hearing my grandfather talk and hearing my dad talk about their differences and the way that things should be done. Like I said, I don't really think that there is any clear-cut strategy to do this. I mean, everyone can have their opinions about ways, strategies and policies that but I don't think that there is any clear-cut strategy.
Yeah.
I think using your voice, just continuing to use your voice against issues like this and continuing to be outspoken about issues like this, I think that's the first step. And I know that might sound redundant to some people out there, because a lot of people will be like, well, what does it really help if we keep falling back into the circle? Unless there is some magic formula that Harry Potter himself has yet to come down and sort of, just Wingardium Leviosa and just eradicate everything. I mean, again, I just don't think that there is a clear cut.
Well, I think the key is something you said earlier about, and again, not to put you in the hot seat, let's take you off the hot seat. I think what you said earlier, that civilizations in a way have always been this way. Mm-hmm. And I have a quote here from Ecclesiastes that actually comes to mind. So a book in the Bible, Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. And this is what it says. Quote, "What has been, that will be. What has been done, that will be done. Nothing is new under the sun. Even the thing of which we say, see, this is new, has already existed in the ages that preceded us. There is no remembrance of the men of old, nor of those to come will there be any remembrance among those who come after them." So it's end quote, right? And that's Ecclesiastes. It's a passage from scriptures talking about this, about nothing new under the sun. It's just a recycling of human civilization in a way, and of this need, right? And maybe it's human nature here that's the problem, right? This need to dominate. And again, we can get into discussions, anthropological discussions of course, how domination and competition and all this are wired into our brains. But I think this is where as a society, right? And I think it starts with individuals. We need to step back,
Yeah.
and say, what is wrong with our world? What's wrong with our society? And how can we come up with creative strategies to help those who are facing hate, right? Because of the color of their skin, because of the way they speak, because of their ethnicity, because of their sexual preferences, um, because of disabilities. And the next podcast, we'll talk a little bit about complexifying identities in general, right? And what that means, how you present yourself versus how people see you, right? Has a lot to do with it. And again, I want to say that there are consequences, right, to how we are perceived. So again, this is not, again, caveat, because I know people are probably like, whoa, where do these two stand?
Yeah.
We stand, yes, on the side of justice. That's what we want.
Yeah.
We want justice.
Yeah.
However, I am careful not to turn that into a wish for some type of utopia.
And I think that, and pardon me for cutting you off here, but I think that that is, for some people, what they're expecting is for it to be completely eradicated. Let it be known right now, that would be perfect. For you to be able to walk down the street and not have to worry about being looked at by another race and be given the dirty look, or
But here's the question, right?
having the stigma of, that would be the ultimate dream, for it to just be squashed altogether.
But here's absolutely, that would be the dream, right? And I think that's what MLK wanted, for example,
Yeah.
right? When he gave his famous speech, I have a dream. That's what he was seeking, right? A world where everybody could just get along. Malcolm X, on the other hand, was more realistic in a way, and he's like, no, that's not going to happen. So we
Because
have to
there's
come up
always
with
going to
different
be,
ways. And for him, it was it was strengthening the Black community specifically, right? It's like buy from Black businesses, live in Black neighborhoods, build those up, and kind of participate in that economy. So his dream was building an economy, a strong, solid economy. Now you're talking about getting looks within our own communities, right? So however you identify, you get looks too.
Oh yeah, I get it all the time. I mean, and this within our own communities, which I'm sure, if you grew up in a low income household, for example, and you and your family get lucky enough after 5 or 6 years to move out of that community and be behind a gated community, in Miramar somewhere, you are then looked at by those that are still in that low income community as
right, and then not necessarily welcomed in the gated community either.
Yeah, because move into that one neighbor that does not want you there, and what have you got? It is the way it is. It's the car you drive, the clothing you wear, you get those looks, all the time. And that's why I said all that to say that it's never going to be 100% eradicated, because I think that there are people out there that whenever you elevate yourself, if they cannot elevate along with you, you are suddenly the enemy. You are suddenly public enemy number one. You are the enemy of the state. You are the enemy of the community.
Yeah.
And that's just, with human condition, that just is the way it is, I think.
That's why I think it's so important when we talk about anything dealing with identity politics. We also have to talk about the economy. We have to talk about culture. We have to talk about, so structures and culture, right? We need to talk about both, because both tend to limit as well as provide, of course, help, right? So it's interesting. In the Black-white binary, you have the Latinx category that's left out completely. It's like, where do Latinx peoples fit in this? Immigrants are also kind of left out of this conversation, right? And they're actually among the most invisible groups especially undocumented immigrants, right? So I think it's important to complexify the conversation and resist falling into just the simplistic narrative of them versus us.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you also know a lot of white brothers and sisters who are epistemologically different than the dominant white culture. They see things differently, right? They are for justice, they are for equal rights.
Yeah.
And I think in those debates, by labeling just black and white, everybody, kind of a blanket statement, it also kind of makes them feel like they're not contributing in any way to the push for justice.
Yeah.
Right. So it's I think it's necessary to diversify the conversation. That's basically, I think, what we both agree on here, right? While not letting go of the push for justice, especially for groups who are consistently being attacked.
Yeah. And I think that's the only, I think, continuing to elevate public conversation is maybe the only way that you can contribute to this effort right now.
And that can only come if one takes the time, right, to learn all these issues. I mean, knowledge is power. It really is. That's such an overused phrase. It's become a cliche, but I think that's true. The more you're aware of how things work, the mechanisms that are at play, how both political parties just use people for votes.
Yes.
I think all that is necessary. And of course, that's not to say that we should stop engaging politically, but there are other ways, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And I would invite, anybody from our audience to join us in conversation, to think about these. That can be a podcast in itself, right? How to resist and how to subvert the political discourses over white, black, even over hate crimes, in order to really come up with strategies that will allow our communities to thrive, not just survive, but to thrive. So that brings us to a close, believe it or not. So last word.
Yeah. Like, what CJ just said, guys, if you have thoughts on this yourselves, leave them in the comments, email us. We welcome, we relish in the fact that, if you want to get on here and join the conversation and further the discussion, we welcome it. I will put the email in the description box below when we upload this. Join the conversation. We welcome it. We embrace it. We love it when you guys reach out to us, leave the comments. That's what we need right now.
Absolutely. And please subscribe too. If you are enjoying what we do and want more, subscribe and send us those comments, because it's your participation as an audience that really motivates us to continue doing.
Really helps us, yeah, to continue to do this.
All right. So until the next one will be on identity. Continuing kind of the line of conversation here and how we can complexify how we talk about identity, right? Because it's multi-layered. So we'll get to that in the next podcast.
Yes.
So closing thought?
No, just continue to take care of each other, continue to love one another, love your neighbor as you love yourself, treat them how you would want to be treated. I think that is the golden rule.
Isn't it amazing, right? How one simple phrase still carries so much weight today. And it's we're talking about complexifying things, but it ultimately is that simple.
Yeah.
Loving yourself, right? Loving others as you would love yourself. Do them, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yeah. It's that simple. Nobody wants to be treated bad.
It's simple, but it's oh so complicated. People just do not understand the weight that carries, because if they did, we wouldn't have stories like this on the news, and this would be a perfect world if everybody adopted that into their daily life. But unfortunately, as we see, it's not so simple. So again, that's why I think that continuing to push that narrative is the best thing that we as a community can do right now,
while complexifying the conversation.
Yes.
All right. So on that note, thank you for your attention and for being with us. And we'll see you next time. Thoughts on the Edge. Signing off.
Take care, guys. Bye.